All right. Sound check. Can everybody hear me tonight? I hope everybody's having a good week. Hope it's starting off good for you. Today being Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. It looks like it's loading on my end. Is it coming through for everybody else? Okay, 5x5. All right. I got something popping up over here. That's might be the problem. There we go. All right. I hope everybody's having a good night out there tonight. I hope the cast is coming through pretty good. I'm not sure why the last few that I've had, there's been like interruptions in them. I've got pretty good cell phone service or internet service out here. My computer is good. I know that for a fact. So not really sure why I keep getting interrupted. I think maybe I'm going too long on some of them. I'm not really sure. But tonight we're going to talk about a few different things, but mainly we're going to focus on some of the nuclear war and some of the things we have to take into consideration. Because I believe if I could survive a nuclear war, then I could survive pretty much anything that comes my way at that point. So some of the things we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about Iran. We're going to talk about the possibility of war with the other nations, the types of blast, and this is a huge factor in how we need to prep. The anatomy of a blast, and what country is likely to use what type of detonation. And we're also going to look at things that we prepare specifically for this event. We're not talking about basic skills. We're not talking about making fire, purifying water. You know, of course, those are things we should already have. Those are skills that we need from the beginning. So I'm not really going to include those. I'm going to include things that are specific towards this type of event. All right. So a little news about the channel. The Discovery Channel seems to be showing interest in the documentary that I was talking about in the last live stream. And they're looking for contestants. The way that the show is going to work is there's no title yet, a couple of working titles, but no title. It's going to be basically simulating nuclear survival and in an actual area that's, radioactive like Chernobyl. And the thing is, Chernobyl, if you walk where, to the nuclear power plant, you're probably going to be irradiated to the point of no return. But the area around that's relatively safe, even though the radiation levels are higher than they are, normally that we would see just like in our normal everyday environment. Prolonged exposure could cause a lot of damage, but the, short-term exposure to very low levels like they're showing out there is not going to be really that detrimental. It's not going to be detrimental to anybody's health. First of all, I don't think the TV show would allow that to go on and, continue if it was. But the way the show's going to be set up is that for anybody that's interested, because they are open casting for contestants right now for people with survival skills, for people that, are willing to take on this challenge. And what they're going to do is the area, not around Chernobyl. Chernobyl's just the general area they're in. And I use Chernobyl because everybody recognizes that. They know what part of the world it's in. But the way the show is going to be set up is I'll be hosting the show and there will be 5 contestants. These 5 contestants they will be literally dropped in the woods. And they'll have 10 items. I believe 10 items is what they've decided on that they can carry with them to help them survive, in addition to a radiation detector and a dosimeter. And the entire challenge is making it from the location they're dropped at to a location that's marked on a map. So these people that are participating in this, they're going to have pretty good land navigation skills, be able to use a map and a compass to go from their current location to where they're trying to head to, because this is the wilderness out there. So there's not going to be any landmarks or road signs to follow. And they'll have to be proficient with a map and a compass. But the show actually is going to pay pretty good as far as the contestants on it. And what I mean is the 5 contestants, at least in the works right now, the 5 contestants, as long as they make it from their primary location, then if they make it to the bunker within 8 days, and you're talking about a 15-mile journey, within 8 days, then they'll receive $15,000 prize money. That might pique someone's interest there. But it's going to be very interesting, and it's coming along pretty good. And if anybody really is seriously interested in casting for this, if you'll email me at survivor@serioussurvivor.com, I will forward your information to the lady that's in charge of the direction for this project. And she's, asking me. She asked me today, sent me an email. Can I provide her with 5 to 10 people that would be willing to compete on this? Because a lot of people aren't willing to. They hear Chernobyl, they hear radiation, and they're like, I'm not doing it. And, I understand, I understand that, nobody wants to go into an area that they think they're going to get hurt in. But trust me when I tell you, I wouldn't be involved in this. I wouldn't be promoting this, if you can say that, or talking about it, if there was a risk to anybody involved. The whole goal is to show a person going from one area, one location, point A, to point B with the minimal gear, using mainly their skills to get them from a starting point to a destination point in a certain time frame. So email me at make sure I spelled that right. Survivor@serioussurvivor.com. And if you're seriously interested, then I'll forward your information onto Kate is the lady's name. I'll forward your information onto her, and then it'll be up to you and her from there as to how to proceed with that. But it's going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to it. But one thing about that is you will be tied up for 32 days. Some pre-production days, some post-production days, about a week on site probably before you start, 8 days to make the journey, and then, a little cool down time at the end. So you're looking at about a month out of your life if this is something you're interested. Who knows, Animos? They might, you never know, man. And if you're interested, send me an email and I will forward it on to her. And from there, it'll be up to, I guess, you and her as that goes right there. But it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be very interesting. And, oh, wow, Dan Lee, you can make a radiation detector out of a soda can and drywall. That's interesting. I really haven't heard that before. I've got a few radiation detectors in front of me right now, but I've never tried to make my own. That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to look at that and check that out. That'd be something I'd like to know how to do. All right, so that's one of the reasons I'm talking about nuclear war tonight, but there's another reason too. And the other reason is what we see going on in the world. And I'm not even talking about politics. I'm not talking about the economy. We all see that. We all see that. You don't need me to say anything about that. We see all that stuff. Gardner, good, maybe. You never know. One thing about Chernobyl, I'll tell you something that's really interesting as I've been researching it, the red forest that surrounds that area. At first, it took the brunt of the radiation. But the thing is, after a while, they say Chernobyl won't be safe for 20,000 years. And, that's true. Chernobyl itself won't be safe for 20,000 years because there are still radioactive elements in that once reactor there. But the area surrounding that, this is not radiating out far enough to, past the inclusion or exclusion zone is about 10 kilometers around it. So anything past that, and you're not receiving any new radiation anymore, you're just exposed to what little fallout fell in the area. And they say the wild hog population in the red forest has went up almost 100% of what it was. That it's really been growing. All right. So talking about this, Iran is what made me, not Iran, but reading about Iran is what made me really want to talk about this tonight, because I feel like, as our society advances, as we advance as humans, war changes. It really changes. 500 years ago, people were fighting with swords, spears, bows and arrows. Now we're using guided missiles. We're using drones. We're using things like that. Before long, we're going to be using robots, and tactical battlefield nukes are going to be a thing commonplace. Nuclear war is not that far-fetched of an idea, especially with the state of the world today. Humans just can't get along with each other, it seems like. And, you have all these countries wanting to destroy all these other countries, with us being one of the primary targets here in the U.S. And Iran is one of those countries that has made public statements that, they would destroy us should they have the opportunity. And that's what's disturbing about some of the news that's coming out of there lately. Some of the news coming out of there, and this is from Iran's own words, and I'm going to read a few lines off some websites here too. I'll put some links up if y'all want to check it out. But basically, Iran has said they will not sit down and will not talk about restricting their nuclear production, their production of uranium, especially enriched uranium, not just the low-grade uranium. But they've been producing enriched uranium. And they say that they're not going to stop. They've already told all of the UN inspectors they're running them off from Iran, basically. And as soon as they ran them off, the inspectors came up with this report that said Iran has, 10 times the amount of radioactive or of uranium-235 that they're supposed to have. And that's a huge difference. They're supposed to be limited to, I believe it's like 200 kilograms. And it's good to see you there, Manifest then. It's supposed to be around 200 kilograms as their legal limit. That's the limit the world put on them, not just the U.S., the world, And they're at over 2,400 and something. I'll give you the exact number in a little bit, kilograms of enriched uranium. And they're not just enriching uranium. To run uranium in a nuclear reactor, it only has to be, 3.5 to 4% enriched. Anything 20% and above is what's called weapons grade uranium. It's what's called weapons grade uranium. They are currently enriching their uranium to 20%. And that falls into the weapons grade category, even though it's on the low end. It's like a black powder rifle versus a, AR-10 308. I mean, it's still a nuclear weapon, though, and it's still very powerful. But with 20% enriched uranium, it's much more difficult to actually put enough uranium in there because it's going to take so much more of it to cause the same size explosion as, say, 90% enriched uranium that you'll find in more of the sophisticated nuclear weapons like in the US, the UK, and China and countries like that. So nuclear weapons are something that, they're not going anywhere. All these treaties, all these talks, they're not going anywhere. None of these countries are going to get rid of their nukes. We're not going to get rid of ours. Russia's not going to get rid of theirs. No one's going to get rid of them. We're just going to keep on doing what we're doing, building more and more and more. And, at some point, somebody somewhere is going to use them. And the only reason I say that is because there are countries out there that make a point to make statements saying that they will use these weapons, and North Korea being one of those countries. But let me read a couple of the exact numbers from what Iran was saying here. And I want to make sure that I get them, correct. I don't want to say anything wrong. Iran limits the UN nuclear inspections while inching closer to talks. Now, what they're talking about here is Iran is not going to enter into nuclear talks again. They said they're not going to enter into them again unless the U.S. drops all of our restrictions, all of our financial restrictions that we have on them. And that's not going to happen. Or, well, I don't know. It might happen. Hopefully it won't happen, because the restrictions that are placed on Iran right now are what's keeping them from producing even more uranium. Because when we think about it, producing uranium, it's not like I can do this in my backyard for $20. This is millions and billions of dollars they have to spend to do this. It's not cheap or easy to refine uranium. When uranium ore comes out of the ground, it has to go through a complete process to be refined into something usable. And the more you want to refine it, the more expensive that becomes, just like with anything else. All right, and I'm looking for... All right here, when as soon as Iran kicked the inspectors out, is when they came out with a report stating that Iran had 2,400 2,442 kilograms, and they had 20% enriched uranium. 20% enriched uranium was, always against the nuclear treaty or deal that was signed with Iran. It was always against it. And this is concerning because there's only one reason to produce. Well, let me rephrase. There's two reasons to produce 20% and above uranium. One is for nuclear powered ships, like, our sailing ships, like our submarines, for nuclear power like that. And that does require better uranium than you can use in a nuclear reactor. But also the second part of that is nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, with 20% uranium are not going to have the yield per kilogram that nuclear weapons with 90% uranium would have. But we have to ask ourselves a question like this: is even with a smaller nuclear bomb, if we think back to 9/11, if we think back to then when the towers came down, when the planes crashed at the Pentagon, what if one of those would have had one of these small nukes with 20% uranium? Would it matter at that point if it's 20 or 90? No, because it would have been a huge area that was impacted by that. This is concerning because it's not going away. They're ramping up production as we speak, and every day, every minute, hour that goes by, they're producing more uranium, more weapons grade uranium. And there may be a lot of arguments out there that say, well, Iran doesn't have the technology to build a nuclear weapon. I mean, seriously, how can you even make an argument like that? Iran is an industrialized nation. Just because the United States and Iran may not see eye to eye on a lot of things, we can't say that they're not technologically capable of building a nuclear weapon. It's absolutely possible. And as a matter of fact, it would be more surprising to me if they do not have nukes than if they already had them. I believe they already have them, but it would surprise me more if they didn't. And that may be why a lot of the UN inspectors are being restricted from coming to that area. All right. Now, when we talk about nuclear war, there's several different ways, several different scenarios, that we could really talk about. And we could go down a rabbit hole here and talk for hours, days on different scenarios. But basically, it's going to boil down to a few things. A country is going to, or someone is going to use a nuclear weapon as a limited strike. They're going to try and take out a certain area to make a statement, a terrorist attack, something like that. And then you have countries that would use nuclear weapons to completely decimate their enemies, to completely decimate them. Other countries would use nuclear weapons to take out a country's ability to defend themselves, like with high altitude nukes that would cause an EMP that could knock down the grid. So nukes will be used in different ways. And it depends on what that country's intentions are as to how they're going to use them against us. Terrorist organizations, very small countries that do not have the means to even wage war against their own neighboring countries, they're not going to hit us with an all-out nuclear assault. I mean, I think we're going to know that. I mean, we know that. But they would hit us with a very small tactical nuke just to do as much damage as they can. And we see that all the time with terrorist activities. So Iran is considered to be, I'm not there in politics, so I don't know the exact details, but they're considered to be the number one state sponsor of terrorism in the world. So how far-fetched is it that they would sell some of this enriched uranium to other groups that feel the same way about the U.S. that they do? The enemy of your enemy is your friend, right? Well, so that's something that we have to really think about. Now, countries that would use nuclear weapons against us, we think about Iran, we think about North Korea. Those are probably the first two that come to mind. At least they are for me. They're the first two that come to mind. And they have similar intentions. I don't think North Korea or Iran would nuke the United States with the intention of taking our grid down and invading us. They don't have the manpower. Their intention would be to take us down and make our country unlivable. And we'll talk about the types of blasts they would use here in just a minute. When we start thinking about countries like China, China is a direct competitor of the United States right now in every aspect of the world. China is quickly overtaking us as the number one economy. China is competing with us on the technology market, even though a lot of the things they're producing were actually stolen from us at some point in time. And they're competing with us on the military aspect too. So China is competing with us on every level. And we might want to sit back and say, well, it's all right. They're not going to catch up. Yeah, they are. They're already there. They already have the technology we have. We don't have any technology that China doesn't have. And that's pretty much public knowledge. They have the manpower. How many people are in China? 1.2 billion, if I'm not mistaken. 350 million in the United States. So we're outnumbered almost 4-1, So they have the manpower. They have the cheap labor. They can produce goods at very low prices. And, some people would consider this slave labor. And for all intents and purposes, in a lot of areas of that country, it is, at least from the reports and from the things I've seen. And they are definitely directly competing with us on a military level now. They have a larger Navy than we do, which is a very big thing considering, 75% of the earth is covered in water. So that's a very big thing. Yes, some very good points on there. Very good points. All right, let's talk about the different types of nuclear explosions. Because as I was talking to people over the last couple of weeks, especially about doing this show, I was talking to my coworkers and all, and we're talking about nuclear explosions. And a lot of people, I know a lot of people do. And if you do, I'm not talking to you, but a lot of people, think a nuclear explosion is a nuclear explosion. Plain and simple, it's all the same. And it's completely different. It's completely different depending on how and where this nuclear bomb is detonated. So I'm going to read off. I like to prepare a little bit here. There are 5 types of nuclear explosions. 5 types. You have your underground or subsurface explosion. And these are mostly done during testing. And we tested a lot of nukes in the 60s, 70s, and even up into the 80s, even though it wasn't supposed to be done then. And even before that. And these nukes were primarily tested. Originally, they were tested above ground. But then people started getting worried. We got EMP effects. We got fallout effects. Then, we got to find a safer way to do this. So they started doing it 2 different ways, underground and underwater. And those are I don't want to say lowest classification of nuclear burst, but those are the ones that don't really concern us because, first of all, a subsurface burst, who's going to do that? Is Iran going to come over here and dig a hole a mile deep in the ground and blow up a nuclear bomb? No, that's for testing purposes. The same with underwater. Now, underwater nuclear bombs are used for specific purposes. And the purpose that an underwater nuclear explosion might be used for is to take out a competing military's navy, to take out their submarine force, or to even disrupt their shoreline. So these are dangerous, but these are the least likely of the ones, or other than subsurface, these are the least likely of the other ones we're going to talk about to actually happen to us and to actually affect us. All right. And the next types are, there's 3 more types: surface burst, air burst, and high altitude burst. And the surface burst and the air burst are the ones that get confused the most often. So we're going to come back to those. The high altitude burst is also known as an HEMP, and high altitude an electromagnetic pulse. And this is anything over 100,000 feet high in the atmosphere. If it's over 100,000 feet high, then this is considered a HEMP, or high altitude electromagnetic pulse. And depending on, the size of the bomb, this can really reach out pretty far. And this is why, they say a high altitude EMP above the United States, could take out most of our power grid. It would really take up 3 because our power grid's broken down into 3 different sections, basically. But it would really take about 3. But the general idea of it is the entire nuclear explosion is simply used as an electromagnetic pulse. They're not relying on the effects of the blast wave, the effects of the fireball, the thermal radiation, and the radiation itself to do any damage. This is a type of attack that has a specific purpose, and that's incapacitating your enemy. It's not going to kill anybody. An EMP is not going to kill the people on the ground unless you're in an airplane or something, or you're driving a car, and if it does happen to die and, you go off the side of the road or something. But other than that, the EMP itself is not going to damage people. It's not going to damage structures. It's not going to knock down buildings. It's simply going to take out our infrastructure, our power grid, and all of our sensitive components. And when that happens, it basically puts a country back into the ice age, back into the ice age, dark ages. I hope it doesn't put us back in the ice age. Sorry, but the dark ages. And that could be a very lasting effect, but it's not a permanent effect. It would just be a matter of time before these things were rebuilt. So with this type of attack, we have to assume that it's a prelude to something more. So a HEMP is basically a prelude to a military invasion. And, that's a whole topic in itself. I'm not getting into military invasions right now, but the high altitude electromagnetic pulse, or HEMP, high altitude blast, also called, is anything over 100,000 feet and above in the atmosphere. Now, I'll read off the exact numbers. Anything below 100,000 feet in which the fireball does not touch the ground is considered an airburst. Okay. An airburst has the widest range of effects. And the reason is because if we think about an airburst, these are optimized. They don't just shoot a missile and say, well, we're just going to blow it up some in the air. They determine this mathematically before a missile is ever fired or a bomb is ever dropped. And the way that this is determined is by, when we look at an explosion, it's going to explode out so far. So we look at the magnitude of that explosion. We look at the magnitude and we do the math and we say, well, it's going to explode that far. Well, if that's the radius, because when it explodes, it's omnidirectional. It's round. It's like a spear. It explodes outward like that. So when we look at the widest radius, widest diameter of that explosion and say, well, how high above the ground can we detonate this so that the widest part of the explosion is what hits the ground, not just the entire explosion? Because with a surface burst, the definition of a surface burst is any nuclear burst in which the fireball directly touches the ground. When the fireball touches the ground, the fireball is the center part. And when you start talking about a several hundred kiloton, or especially in the megaton range, your fireball isn't going to go out further than a mile, maybe 2. Whereas your thermal radiation and your overpressure is going to go out for 10, 20, 30 miles. So they're trying to optimize this with an airburst so that the maximum exposure hits the earth at the same time. With a surface burst, it's more like it hits the ground, and when it explodes, you're only getting a portion of that explosion because the ground's going to absorb a lot of the impact. The ground's going to absorb a lot of the energy, a lot of the heat coming off of that surface burst. So the definitions: subsurface, below the ground, and it may be called underwater usually, or water burst is either below the surface of the water or taking place on the surface of the water. Then we have our surface burst, in which the fireball hits the ground and spreads out from there. Then we have the air burst, which is lower than 100,000 feet, but high enough where the fireball does not touch the ground. And then we have the HEMP, or the high altitude burst. And that's anything over 100,000 feet. That's going to result basically in just an EMP, maybe some slight overpressure. So those are basically the 5 different types. Now, when a bomb is detonated below 100,000 feet, but high enough that the fireball of the detonation does not actually touch the Earth's surface, is considered an air blast. Conversely, when a nuclear bomb is detonated at or slightly above the surface, because with a surface burst, even though we use the word surface burst, it doesn't mean the bomb's going to hit the surface. It's not. It's going to hit above the surface, probably 1,000 foot, something like that. It's going to hit above the surface, and that's called your optimal height for the blast. You're gonna try and make it explode a little bit above the surface with a surface burst. So conversely, above the surface of the land or water, it is deemed a surface blast. Both types of blast yield different destructive outcomes to the surrounding areas. Now, and this is the most important part. This is the most confusing part. And it was to me when I first started studying nuclear fission years ago, is that, a nuclear explosion is it's radioactive elements. It's a radioactive, process, and it's going to, irradiate or contaminate everything around it. And that's just not necessarily entirely true. That may seem like that. It's like if I throw water on something, it's going to get wet. But I mean, it may seem like anytime there's a nuclear blast, it's going to contaminate the entire area. But the reason it doesn't, and that's another reason for the air burst. The air burst is not just, done that way. It's done intentionally as an air burst, not because it's going to spread out further, because overall, it's not going to be quite as destructive as a surface burst, but it'll cover a much larger area, sometimes 2.5 to 3 to 4 to 5 times the area of the same yield as a surface burst. The reason that an air burst is used is because the fireball doesn't touch the ground. All of the radioactive particles, isotopes, elements are burned up in the fireball. So if the fireball does not touch the ground, there's nothing radioactive to disintegrate the dust particles, the dirt, the debris from buildings, and thrust it up into the atmosphere, thus causing radioactive fallout. With an air burst, it's not going to do that. With an air burst, you may have some particles in the air that are irradiated and may then be distributed across the globe, but it's going to be dissipated and distributed, and it's probably not going to be very detrimental to most people. There may be hot zones here or there, but it's not going to be like a surface burst. With a surface burst, the fireball hits the ground, so it disintegrates everything that's on the ground, because you're looking, the outer edge of the fireball is going to be over 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's hotter than the surface of the sun, which averages about 8,000. So that's very hot. It's going to vaporize everything it touches. And as it vaporizes that, and the explosion comes back inward, it's going to pull it back up, and you're going to get the mushroom cloud, and it's going to dissipate that radioactive fallout around surrounding areas. And that's what makes the surface burst more of a long-term threat than the air burst. A surface burst would be used when you want to completely annihilate the enemy in a certain area. It's not used for any other purpose, to annihilate the enemy and to make that area off limits for a very long time. So those are the 5 types of bursts. We have subsurface, water or underwater, surface, air burst, and high altitude. Yeah, Keisha, I read about that. Those hypersonic missiles that Russia's got. Those are supposed to be really, really fast and really maneuverable. Very hard to shoot down. Russia does have more nukes than we do. I mean, just by sheer numbers, they outnumber us by. I'd have to look back at the numbers, but I think it's close to 1,000. They outnumber us by quite a bit. They outnumber us by. All right. All right, I'm going to read a little bit more about the surface burst here. When a nuclear bomb is detonated close or on the ground, it produces radioactive fallout. Upon explosion, radioactive particles such as fission products, radiated soil, and weapon waste are sent into various levels of the atmosphere. Depending on the direction and the power of the wind, radioactive fallouts can travel extremely long distances. There are 2 types of fallout. There are local and global. Local fallout is the fallout that falls in that general vicinity because the particles didn't rise high enough to be carried, distributed throughout the world. The global fallout, these are the lighter particles that are vaporized, and they're put up higher into the atmosphere, so they're carried over longer distances, and they're eventually distributed throughout the world. The local fallout is going to be the most concentrated. The global fallout is going to be more dissipated, but any type of radiation is definitely still a risk. I mean, radiation is nothing to play with, especially when it comes to something like that. Yeah, that's right. Nukes are the final court of appeals. They will always be in play, and that's true. And that's one of the things we're seeing on the world stage today. Russia's beefing up its arsenal. China is really building their nuclear arsenal. And we were building ours. I'm not sure what the direction that's going to take at this point. Just saying, because I haven't heard much about it since the new administration took office. But we see Iran basically refusing, inspectors coming in, and they're already admitting that they have the 20% enriched uranium. And there's one right here that they actually said, let me get the exact quote here. All right. The president of Iran had ordered this move, and that's referring to enriching uranium to 20%, is because he was bound by a new law they just passed requiring the production and storage of 20% enriched uranium. So they passed a law that said they got to make it now. So he's saying, hey, I'm just following my laws and I'm making this weapons grade uranium, and no one's doing anything about it. And that's the crazy thing about it. We're talking about, hey, we want Iran to come to nuclear talks. Well, they're sitting there telling you they're not going to do it, and they're making weapons grade uranium, and they're upping their production, and people are still sitting back saying, we want them to come to the talks. Talks aren't going to do a whole lot. Just to put it bluntly, they're going to develop nuclear weapons if they don't have them already. Yeah, that's right. Yankee watchdog, you're right. All right. I wanted to talk about, just to get the effects of what you could expect here. I want to talk about a 300 kiloton airburst. Now, I know that we've got weapons in our arsenal that are megaton range, well above 15, 20 megatons, some of the biggest ones, but 1 or 2 megatons in the high intermediate range. But most countries that have nukes have something in the 300 kiloton range, and countries that are developing nukes are developing them in this range and possibly even higher. These days, the only things that are smaller than between 100 and 300 kilotons, are your tactical battlefield nukes and things like that. Because with modern technology, it's become much more efficient. We can fission these with a much higher rate or higher yield than used to be. Nuclear weapons these days are nothing like they were in World War II. I mean, it's a completely different ball game now as far as the effectiveness of them. All right. The effect distances for a 300 kiloton airburst. And this is important to distinguish. And the reason I want to talk about this is because let's say that this 300 kiloton is an average range. When a presidential alert, a text message comes on my phone that says there's a nuclear missile inbound for Detroit, because I'm not very far from Detroit here, they're not going to say, hey, well, this is 150 kilotons launched by so-and-so, at this speed. They're not going to tell me anything. That I'll be lucky to even get that warning to know that it's coming there. So we have to assume it's at least in the intermediate range, because I'm not going to assume it's 1 kiloton or 2. I'm going to assume it's big enough that it's a threat for them to send that kind of warning to us. Yeah, Ray, I agree. I think we might be in the tribulation too, my friend. But a 300 kiloton nuke is just intermediate. So this is representative of what you could expect, if one hit near you. And we're going to look at some things we can do to prepare that'll really help us after we get past this section here. All right. The effective distances for a 300 kiloton airburst. This is focused on the airburst. And the reason I focus it on the airburst is because if you can maintain these distances or get this far away from it that we're going to talk about, then you're definitely going to be safe for surface burst, especially if you follow the wind patterns. You got to follow the wind patterns. And I'm going to put up a great resource for that here in a little bit. It's a live wind pattern map that has all the historical wind records. You can go on there for a little while, sort of study it, and you get a really good feel of how the wind blows through your general area. And, you can look at what's a threat and what's not. Like me here in Michigan, Detroit, right here to my east. That's a threat to me as far as this kind of thing goes. But luckily for me, the wind blows the opposite direction. I'm upwind of Detroit. But the capital of Michigan is another 40 miles up the road to me to the west. I'm like in between Lansing and Detroit. So, depending on where it hits, if it hits in Lansing, I'm right in the path of the fallout. If there is fallout, I'm right in that path. So I've got 15 minutes to get out of my house and get out of town, or at least to start making that journey. All right, when we talk about the effectiveness of a nuke, all right, when we say, 300 kiloton blast, that does not mean I'm going to be feeling a blast wave with that magnitude 2 miles out. This is going to, it's going to dissipate as it spreads out. And that's what we want to look at here, is look at the danger zones. Now, the radiation radius of a nuclear weapon is the centermost point of where it detonates. And it's an area that extends around that centermost point, around that point of detonation. And it's a very small area. To be honest, this is going to be the area for a surface burst that's going to be contaminated for a very long time, a very, very long time. But if, we're not planning on going back into that area, this really doesn't apply to me when the nuke goes off, because if I'm that close to it, I'm dead. Nothing else is going to matter. And for a 300 kiloton airburst, approximately 460 meters out, or 0.67 kilometers squared around the center of the blast, will be 500 rims of an ionizing radiation dose. And this is very likely fatal. So even after the blast dissipates, even after the explosion's gone, if I walk into that area, I'm walking into 500 rims. REM stands for Roentgen equivalent in man, and 500 rims is a pretty significant number. It may not kill me at first, but it's going to kill me at some point in time, and it's probably only going to take about 30 days. And that's what it goes on to say here is, it's likely fatal in about 1 month. 15% of survivors will eventually die of cancer as a result of exposure. So 15% will be expected to survive. Let me put that in perspective. We know we can't survive a nuclear blast, but let's say I was downtown Detroit and I was in a bunker that did survive the nuclear blast. If I get out of that bunker and just start walking with no protective gear on, this is what I'm facing. I'm not going to last very long. The longest I'm probably going to last is 30, maybe if I'm lucky, 45 days. And that's going to be a very painful and very difficult, time frame. So this general area of the blast is, of course, going to be off limits at that point in time. The fireball. Now, we've talked a lot about the fireball. And we talked about if the fireball touches the ground, that's a surface burst. If the fireball doesn't touch the ground, that's an air burst. And this is the hottest, the most intense part of the explosion. It's the centermost. When it first explodes, I'm trying to put my hand up in front of the camera. I can't see it. When it first explodes out, that force from that explosion can't continue forever. It dissipates. But within a certain range, you have this intense heat and intense radiation, and this is called the fireball. It literally is the air on fire. Everything is vaporized within that fireball. So if you make it, what's the difference between rims, grays, and sieverts? All right, I'm going to get to that in just a minute because that's a very important question. But I'll talk about that. So the fireball, if you're in there, you're dead. Anything that's in there is going to be vaporized. So that's not a good place to be. Then you have what's called the moderate blast radius damage. And this stretches out about 4.7 kilometers from the point of the explosion, covering about 69.6 kilometers squared. And this is for a 300 kiloton burst. This is all in metric here. And this is what most people are going to call your blast wave. Your blast wave, this is where that intense pressure just comes out. That shock wave, boom, just comes out. And it's going to extend for 70 kilometers squared. A blast wave at 5 times atmospheric pressure, extending outward at about 2 to 3 times the speed of sound. This is going to be lethal to most people in this general area. This will take down buildings. This will collapse buildings. For those that are in bunkers, you're going to have a building collapse on top of you at that point. It's going to be hard to get out that bunker. So this is an area that you don't want to be in. Of course, we can't control who sends a nuke to our city and who doesn't. The best we can do is react from it. That's why planning ahead of time is the most important thing. If I have a plan, I will have time to get out. If I don't have a plan, then I'm just going to stand around thinking, what am I going to do? And then I'm going to see a nuke going off, on the horizon. Now, outside of this area, outside of the initial 70 square miles around this explosion, is what's called the thermal radiation radius. This is, you might as well say, it's just as dangerous as the previous radius. And that's because at this distance, and this will extend outward 7.17 kilometers radius from the explosion, covering an area of approximately 161 square kilometers or 80 square miles. And that's a pretty big area. And this area, you're guaranteed to have third-degree burns, unless you're in a bunker. If you're not in a bunker, you're going to get third-degree burns on at least part of your body, and that's if you survive. And this is going to be an extremely, extremely painful thing for a lot of people. And this can cause severe scarring, disablement, and even amputation. Because if I'm hiding, say, behind a wall and this radiation, I'm hit, the bomb goes off, the radiation and the thermal, because you got to remember, this is thermal radiation. We say thermal radiation, we're not talking about gamma rays and x-rays. We're just talking about straight up heat, just intense heat. So if I'm behind 15, 20 inches of concrete, then I may be able to survive that. But if I'm behind there and I got my arm up in the air, then my arm is going to receive some pretty severe third-degree burns, and it's probably going to have to be amputated at that point. So that's a huge area. Think about it. 161 square kilometers. Let's say 80. What would that be? 80 miles, 80 square miles. Just say 80 square miles of where you're sitting at right now. Everyone within that radius would either be killed or have third-degree burns, or they would have to have been sheltered in place pretty reasonably. The last component to the blast is what's called the light blast radiation, or excuse me, light blast radius. And it says light blast is because this is only 1 atm above your pressure, or 1 psi above your standard pressure, your standard air pressure you're used to every day. And this is going to be enough to break windows, maybe knock doors down in some instances, knock people down, yes, hurt your pets. Probably not going to kill you. Your biggest threat in this outer edge of the nuclear explosion is flying debris, because when it bursts windows, when it knocks, breaks things up, then it's going to send that flying debris, and that flying debris is, could very well hit somebody. And that's what makes that, that's the most dangerous part of that. But the problem is it has spread out so much since then, because you had the initial explosion, your radiation radius, very small, lethal. Then you had your fireball, but it only goes out so far. It only goes out so far because it dissipates. Then you have your thermal radiation radius. And then you have then you have your blast radius. Then you have your thermal radiation radius. And now you have your light radius. And this last area is basically just, like we said, 1 psi above. This isn't going to kill you, not just from the pressure, but it's going to be very damaging if you are not taking cover. But the problem with that area is, with a 300 kiloton blast, you're talking it's going to cover 550 square kilometers. So 550 square kilometers around that blast. So 200 and something square miles. And if I think about 200 something square miles around me with that kind of damage, there's millions of people live in this area. There's no telling what the death toll would be from that. All right. Now I want to get into, you can order the potassium iodine pills. That's a good thing. I was going to mention those later, but I just saw somebody said it and I wanted to mention it. But wait until you are exposed. These are effective against radioactive iodine, because radioactive iodine attacks the thyroid, and the potassium iodine that you take, you can get over the counter, counteracts that effect and will save your thyroid, but it will destroy your thyroid if you take it and you're not exposed to radiation. So be careful with those. If you overtake them and you're not exposed, at least that's what I've read. I haven't took them as far as just eat them, but you have to make sure to use those properly is the best way. But they definitely work, and they've been proven to work in multiple areas. All right. So let's talk about the different radiation units and radiation detectors for a little bit. We talk about radiation detectors, and I'm a big advocate of it. I have a few. There's multiples on the market. They range, they're not cheap. You know, you can get some that are, you know, less than $100, definitely. But you can spend $10,000 on one if you want to. That all depends on how much money you got and how, you know, how you want to spend it. And the more, you know, the more you spend, of course, the more features it's going to have. But they all basically do one thing that's important, and that's detect radiation levels. Now, these detectors will detect radiation levels in different ways. There are different units of exposure. All right, there are different units of exposure, and some of the more common ones, I'm going to bring up a chart because I'm going to read off the actual, I know the units, but I want to read off to you the conversion ratios, if you're curious about the conversion ratios. All right. Now, first, there's a total of 8 basic units. 8 basic units. 4 of them are standard international units, SI units. The other 4 units are basically common units. It's like the difference between the English, you know, 12 inches is a foot, you know, and the metro system, you know, it's a difference like that, an international standard and what's called a common standard, but they sort of are equivalent of each other depending on what units you're talking about. Now, there's 4 different categories that these fall under. There's 4 different categories, and that's radioactivity. And then you have your absorbed dose, you have your dose equivalent, and then you have your exposure. Now, the absorbed dose, the most common term that people probably will hear is the term or the word RAD, R-A-D. And this stands for radiation absorbed dose. Now, a RAD, a radiation absorbed dose, is equal to, as far as this is the common unit, the standard unit, standard international unit, SI unit for that is called the gray. So you may have heard gray, may have heard RAD. RAD and gray measure the same thing. They measure the amount of radiation I'm exposed to, my exposure, what I could possibly absorb. And that's what's called radiation absorbed dose, RADs. 1 gray equals 100 RADs. 1 gray equals 100 RADs. Now you have 2 other units, and these are what's called dose equivalent. And I'm going to explain this. The sievert, and the sievert is the standard international unit. And then you have the REM, R-E-M. And what REM stands for is Rontgen equivalent in man. The Rontgen is a unit of measure for radioactivity. And Rontgen equivalent in man also factors in something else, the type of radiation that you're receiving. So like if you're receiving gamma radiation, then you have a quality factor, a multiplier of 1. So that means if I'm exposed to, 100 rads, then I've got 100 times 100. I've got 100 Rontgen, or REM, 100. I should say it properly, REM, because Rontgen is different than REM. So I have 100 REM. Now, if I were exposed to other types of radiation, like let's say I ingested alpha particles, then the multiplication factor is 20. So if I had 100 rads of alpha particles that I ate for some reason, then I multiply that times 20. Now I've got 2,000 rads that I've taken in, or the equivalent of that, with the REMs. So that's a pretty dangerous level at that point. So that the REMs, for the most part, is going to be multiplied by 1. But depending on the factor, it could be multiplied by 20, and it could be multiplied by other factors, depending on the type of radiation that you take in. Then depending on the radiation detector that you use is what's going to detect, these different ones. And for example, this is one of the old civil defense radiation detectors. And when I look at the radiation detector right here, it's a pretty simple device. These are the older kind, and these are probably the cheaper ones that you can get on the market. I don't know how well, it doesn't look like it's coming through too well, but it's got a dial on it. It's fairly accurate. It's got a big handle, but the drawback is it feels like a 5-pound bag of sugar, basically. That's about how it feels. And I don't have batteries in it right now. So if I had batteries, it'd be another pound probably, because it uses the big D cells. These are very good. And one of the good things about these is that, you know, you can see it's a pretty simple design. This is something I can work on. I can troubleshoot this kind of electronics and fix it should I need to. When you look inside, there's nothing really fancy in there. And these devices, they last. This one I'm looking at right here it's an antique, and it functions just properly when I put batteries in it. As you can see, I don't have any batteries when I turn this on. I'm not getting anything. I don't keep them in there. It takes the D batteries. I don't keep them in there because it, you know, could corrode them. But some of the more modern types of radiation detectors that you'll see, and you know, keep in mind, I don't have the most expensive ones on the market out here. I don't have the most expensive ones. I have a Radex, and it does okay, but it's a little flimsy. I ain't gonna lie to you. If you drop this thing, you know, that's probably the last time you're ever going to use it. But this will measure in rads, and it will measure in sieverts also. Now, that's what I want to go back to also. I started getting away from that a little bit. Is gray, I'm going to read off an equivalent right here that might make some sense. If I can find my right screen. That's not it. And that's not it. So this has to be it. Well, that's not it either. That is. Okay. Well, where did it go? All right, give me 1 second. I think I closed it out. Or basically, I can just say it. Equivalently, if we look at, if we start talking about these units, okay, if we start talking about these units, basically 1 gray is equal to 1 sievert. 1 rad is equal to 1 rem. All right. Now that's fairly close, and I'm gonna read you the exact number in a minute. Now 1 gray is not equal to a rad, even though they measure the same unit. This is where it gets so confusing. You know, it's so hard to, well, you know, I'm seeing, okay, I've got, you know, I've got 1,000 or 500 millisieverts that I'm registering, you know, and that's not going to be as high as it sounds. So trying to pull this document up. It keeps disappearing on me. There we go. All right. All right. So the conversion ratio works like this. Now this is I'm going to talk about a couple of things here that I may not have mentioned yet. In radioactivity, your units are measured in what's called the becquerel and the curie. I'm sure we've all heard of curie, you know. And in absorbed dose, your SI units are gray. Your common unit is rad. Dose equivalent, your SI unit is sievert. Now, normally these are not measured in sieverts. And the reason I want to say that is because when you look at a radiation detector, these are going to be measured in microsieverts most likely. Because if I'm getting sieverts, full sieverts of radiation dose equivalent, I'm probably in trouble. The sievert is the SI unit for dose equivalent, and the common unit is the rem or REM. Exposure is measured in coulombs per kilogram for the SI units and Rontgen for the common units. 1 curie equals 3.7 by 10 to the 10th power disintegrations per second. So that's what radioactivity means, is basically 3.7 times 10 to the 10th power disintegrations per second, or that many atoms losing a particle due to radioactivity. 1 becquerel equals 1 disintegration per second. So 1 millicurie equals 37 megabecquerels. But the more important part, because we're not really going to see that unless you're in a scientific lab somewhere, is you're going to see rads, you're going to see grays, you're going to see rems, and you're going to see sieverts. So these are the ones that, you know, we really need to know what the reading means on a radiation detector, because my radiation detector doesn't do me any good unless I know what it's saying. 1 rad is equal to 0.1 grays, or basically 1 gray is equal to 100 rads. And I personally look at it that way. I say 1 gray is 100 rads. So when I'm looking at my radiation detector and I see, oh, I'm exposed to, you know, 50 rads. Well, that's 0.5 grays. And when we talk about the gray, these are the units that we really have to worry about. It is the gray, the rad, the rim, and the sievert. Those are the ones that are telling us how much damage is being done, how much we're absorbing, and then how much damage is being done. So when it comes to rads and when it comes to grays, if I experience 1 to 2 grays or 100 to 200 rads, this is not a good thing, of course, but it's not going to kill me. It's probably not even going to make me sick. It depends on how I'm exposed to, and that's another part about radiation is how I'm exposed. If I'm exposed to that much all at once, just hitting me in a flash, it's going to do more damage than if I'm exposed to all that over a long period of time with spaces in between. It takes 2 to 3 gray before you start feeling radiation sickness. 4 to 5 gray will kill most people, about 50% of the people that experience 4 to 5 gray within 30 days. Anything from the 7 to 10 gray range, especially when you get above 10 grays, which is, 1,000 rads, then you're talking pretty much death at that point. So really the range you're looking at keeping this below, is the 1 gray. You don't even want to get up to 2. I mean, 2's not going to kill you, but you want to stay below that. You want to stay around 1 or below, definitely below that, which would be 100 rads or less. So those are the units. And it is a bit confusing. I mean, there's just so much, because not only are we talking about these units, but then you can start talking about these units saying rads per hour, sieverts per hour, sieverts per year, and it just grows and grows and grows. But understanding the basics of the radiation detector, when I'm looking at the rads, of course you want to see the lowest number that possible, but it's going to read in rads and it's going to read in millisieverts or microsieverts a lot of times. And that's important to remember, because there's a big difference in the unit I'm using and what I should see on my radiation detector. All right. All right, so let's talk about some things. All right, well, let me give you the exact numbers of the Röntgen measurements here. We talked about some, but I'm going to finish that up. 1 rad equals 1 rim. 1 gray equals 1 sievert. And this goes back again for gamma rays. If I start talking about alpha particles, then that's a whole different ballgame. Alpha particles, most people are like, alpha don't hurt you. No, it doesn't. If it lands on my skin, it's never going to get through my skin. But the problem is most radiation detectors don't detect the alpha particles. They don't detect them. So when they fall, and they're actually one of the most common, when they fall, they're going to land on, objects around me. If they land in my water supply, if they land on my sandwich and I eat that, well, now I have alpha particles inside my body, and there they can do more damage than they ever could from the outside. And that's why your multiplication factor for alpha and beta is 20, as opposed to gamma being 1, because gamma is just going to do the damage it's going to do, whether, no matter how you are exposed to it. But the other ones, they're going to do more damage definitely from the internal side than they are from the external side. So I could actually be exposed to a lot of alpha and get away with it, because it doesn't penetrate my skin. And if I had on any type of protective clothing, it would not penetrate that. But it's the beta that will get through that protective in a lot of cases. And it's the gamma that will also get through it. All right. So I think that a nuclear war is definitely a survivable event. And one of the main reasons I believe it's true survivable, maybe easier than some of the other ones, is because it's going to be isolated. And I'm not talking about the fallout yet, but when there's a nuclear explosion, there are not enough nuclear weapons in the world to cover the entire landmass of the world. Mathematically, it doesn't add up. And I did a lot of research on that for one of the last videos I did on nuclear war. There's not enough to cover the entire landmass. Now, 5 years from now, that probably will be a different story. But as far as right now, they're not gonna nuke, little town in Appalachian Mountains in South Carolina. They're gonna nuke Atlanta. They're gonna nuke New York. They're gonna nuke Detroit. They're going to nuke our shipping ports. They're going to nuke places like that, the capital. So it's going to be, I hate to say isolated, but it's not going to be an event like, say, a meteor strike, you know, that the entire blast wave, or I should say asteroid, because that was the incorrect term for that, asteroid strike, to where the entire blast wave just wipes, you know, out the entire country. This is going to be something that's survivable if two things, mainly if you have the knowledge and you have the plan ahead of time. And if you have the gear is going to be important for this. And some of the gear I'm going to talk about, you know, is only going to be needed in a certain scenario. So let's look at just a little bit of gear here that could help us out. All right. One of the things is a gas mask. Now, of all the devices that I can go online and buy for a reasonable price, well, you can't really get gas masks for a reasonable price anymore, but a little more reasonable than an actual radiation suit. Okay. A gas mask will prevent you from breathing in radioactive particles, and that's going to save you from inhaling, you know, alpha and beta particles that are going to kill you from the inside. A gas mask will also serve multiple other purposes. If it's burning, if you're in an area of the city and it's burning, there's too much smoke, and not just smoke, but other chemicals from things that are burning that are in the atmosphere, in the air, and it's choking you and things like that. A gas mask is going to save your life. This can save your life in more instances than one. It doesn't have to be an FM53, you know, $900 gas mask. It can be, you know, a much cheaper version. You know, Scott, MSA, they make some for $100 and less that work really well. They work extremely well, and they're all CBRN. So that's going to be one important thing. Now, the next one I want to talk about is hazmat suit and the gear that goes along with it, like your gloves and your boots and your tape that you can tape off the seams on the suit so nothing can get in it. Now, hazmat suits, whether it be the $10, you know, little Tyvek suit, white Tyvek suit that you get, you know, on Amazon or eBay, those are good. None of these suits, with the exception of very expensive high-dollar suits, actually protect you from radiation. None of them block radiation. Not even a CBRN gas mask. It does not block radiation. You have to have a specialized suit that blocks large amounts of radiation. And these, as I've priced them, not recently, but I know they went up now, but when I priced them in the past, you're talking $1,500, $2,000 for these suits. And that's on the cheapest end of them that actually block radiation. The purpose of a gas mask and a hazmat suit is not to block the radiation, but to keep those particles from falling directly onto your skin and absorbing into your skin, getting into the pores of your skin, and to keep me from breathing it in. Now, these aren't going to protect me from radiation. So if I'm in a very, very radioactive area, it's not going to do me a bit of good to put this stuff on and go outside. And that's the importance of a radiation detector. Having a radiation detector, I can determine whether it's safe enough for me to put this gear on and get out of that particular area. So these suits are going to be extremely important, but I do want to point out that most of them do not block radiation. They block the particles from falling on your skin. And radiation detector. All right, now radiation detectors, we've already looked a little bit at, but I want to point out another thing. You can go online and you can spend, because I price them all the time. I still go look at stuff. Even though I got a bunch of them, I still look at them all the time. And when you start looking at them, and, you know, you see one that's $500, it's got all these pretty little buttons on it. It's got this nice display screen, and it says, oh, we get 4 kinds of radiation. Oh, you get 4 kinds of radiation. You know, that's got to get everything. Most do not detect alpha. Most do not detect alpha. They're not going to come out and brag about that, but they'll say, we detect beta, we detect gamma, we detect X-ray, and blah, blah, a couple other waveforms on the electromagnetic spectrum, but not the one that's most likely to kill a lot of people, the one that gets in your body, and that's alpha. There's one surefire way that you can always tell if a radiation detector detects alpha, and that's if you look at the back of it. You see that screen on the back of this one? If it does not have a screen similar to that, it does not detect alpha. Just like, see this Rad-X. This is a good, I paid more for this one than I did for this one. But look at the back of it. Flat back. See? The reason this one's got a screen is because alpha can't penetrate the case, so it can't detect it. And a lot of people say, well, it can't penetrate the case. I'm not worried about it. Well, yeah, it's not going to penetrate my skin, but it'll get on that apple right there. And when it's time for me to eat, guess what? I just ate a bunch of alpha. And if my radiation detector doesn't detect that, I'll never know it. I'll just start getting sick for no reason and get sicker and sicker until it's too late. So, if you're going to get a radiation detector, then get one that detects alpha. It's worth the investment because that is most likely going to be one of your biggest enemies, because alpha falls on the particles that we eat, drink, walk on, lay on, put our clothes on, all that stuff. So you want to be, if you're going to get one, it's one of those things. If you're going to get one, get the good one. And I don't mean the $1,000 one. This one here, I'll be honest, I think I paid, it's called a GQ something. GQ GMC 600. It's not the top of the line. It doesn't have a lot of, different features, but it does detect radiation. And I know it detects it accurately because in my safe in there, I have some uranium and also have some radioactive beads that I bought that gave off exact, precise, specific levels. So I could test my devices on them, very small levels, but I test my devices on them and it works. It works perfectly. It works exactly like I would expect it to. And it's a lot cheaper than, some of the other ones. But if you got the money, there's some really good ones out there that can do a lot. Now there's another device too. And this one's just as important. Not all of them will look like this. This is the older one. It actually goes with that radiation detector and it plugs onto this right here. I can't get my camera right. It plugs onto that. All right. Now, this is what I call a dosimeter. A dosimeter. The difference between a radiation detector and a dosimeter. Now, some radiation detectors, depending on the features they have, as long as you keep it powered up, it will keep track of how much radiation you accumulate over an amount of time. But when I power it down, it can't keep track anymore because it's got no power. So if I want to keep track of the radiation that I've been exposed to over a prolonged period of time, then I'm going to have to have what's called a dosimeter. And this is an example of a pin dosimeter. I don't know if you can see in the bottom. We'll see if you can. No, you're not going to be able to see. But you look through this, and it actually, if you point it up towards the light and you look through it, you'll actually see a scale that goes, in my case here, from 1 to 10. And it tells me cumulatively how much radiation I've absorbed over the last since the last time I checked it. Now this resets. I just push it down on here and it resets so I can keep track of my radiation tomorrow. Now they make these in pins like this, little pins like this. They make them that look like clip-on work badges. They make them that look like credit cards. And they just keep track of the amount of radiation you're exposed to so that hey, over the last month, I've been exposed to X amount of radiation, whether that's dangerous or not. So one of these is also a good idea because it gives you a good idea of how much you've been exposed to, over a time period. Now, when it comes to a radiation detector, the radiation detector has one purpose, and that's to keep me away from areas that are radiated. So when I use this, it's not like, and I'm going to be listening to it as it's going. I don't know if I got batteries in it right now. I usually take them out. No. Yeah, it says my battery level is low. But it'll start beeping, or depending on what type of sound you have set up on it, it'll start beeping to let you know that it's picking up radiation. Another term that you'll hear is CPM, or counts per minute. And that's telling me that the amount of radiation is showing me on my screen. And then it'll have it in counts per minute. Say it's 100 times per minute. That means 100 times per minute it detected that amount of radiation. So it does take a little practice looking at these. And I'm going to be honest, just the little video just what we've talked about here is not enough. You probably need to read a little bit more and look at some other things. I'm going to try to put up some documents that help out with that. But, don't let just what I say here, lead you in that direction. research some more for yourself, because this is such a huge subject. It's such a huge subject. I mean, we barely are scratching the surface of it tonight. I mean, we could go hours, days, months. I mean, how long does it take to get a doctorate in physics? Very, very long time. I don't have one, but I'm just saying, this is not an easy subject. It's not a quick subject. We scratched on the basics of it tonight, and understanding the units that we read on our radiation detector is a big thing. When you read the rads, that's how much you're exposed to at that moment in time. When you read the sieverts, because that's generally the common units that these are going to be on. Some of the more sophisticated ones will read everything, but I really don't need to know becquerels. I really don't need to know a lot of this other stuff. I need to know rads and I need to know sieverts. So being able to read and interpret that is going to guide you in the right direction, because if I'm out walking through an environment, after a nuclear war, and my radiation detector says, 5 rads, 10 rads, and I keep walking 10 more feet, now it's up to 12 rads, and I keep walking 20 more feet, now it's up to 50. Well, this thing doesn't protect me against radiation. It's warning me, hey, it's going up, turn around. So this helps you skirt or flank those areas that you are detecting radiation in until you're not detecting any, and you can take a safe path on through there. This isn't something that I use to make it okay for me to pass through those areas. It's to help me avoid those areas, help me dodge those areas. Yeah, Faraday cages. Faraday cages are extremely important. And see, that's where, a lot of people say, well, this ain't going to work after a nuclear bomb. Well, most likely it probably is. But let's say, the EMP from that bomb was big enough. I don't use this every day. So this would be a device I put in a Faraday cage, that I put in that trash can, in that device that I built as a Faraday cage, and leave it in there. I don't got to take it out and play with it. I know how to use it. Leave it in there. Leave your unimportant stuff in there, or your important stuff that you don't use every day in there, and you'll have that many more resources, when it's all said and done. All right. We've been going a little while, but there's one more thing when it comes to prepping for a nuclear war that I really want to talk about. And it's the most important thing of anything. It's the most important thing of any bug out, of any, catastrophe. It's the most important of any SHTF scenario. It's the most important of everything. Have a plan. It doesn't do me much good to know all this information about how a nuclear bomb works and how radiation detectors work if I ain't got a clue as to what I'm going to do if a bomb really went off. And yeah, planning takes time. It's not the easiest thing in the world. I'm not going to sit down in 30 minutes and come up with 10 escape routes from a city that I've never been in before. Yeah, this is going to take time, but that's where perseverance, prepping comes into play. Having a plan to get you and your family out of, whatever, whether it be a city or whether it be in, outskirts of a city, whatever the situation may be, to get out of that area to a safe location, upwind of that nuclear explosion, is going to be the difference between life and death. Because if the economy crashes tomorrow, I'm not bugging out. I'm sitting right here, and just do the best I can, I reckon. But if a nuclear bomb goes off in Detroit, yes, I'm bugging out, and I do have a plan for that. Not a lot of scenarios are going to require people to bug out from their home immediately, but this is one of them. This is one of the few. You start talking about, nuclear war, maybe an asteroid strike somewhere, maybe a super volcano, Yellowstone, things like that. They're going to make you evacuate immediately. Some type of radiation leak locally, that might make me evacuate immediately. Civil war, civil unrest, economic collapse, grid down, all this other stuff. I'm not going anywhere until I feel the need that I have to go somewhere, because at that, I'm safer right here than I am walking down the road. So when it comes to these types of events, you got to have a bug out plan. A lot of people don't have those plans, or they have a basic plan. They say, well, I'm going to get over here on I-75 and I'm going to get off on exit 50 and I'm going to go up to the mountains. No, you ain't, because that's going to be all blocked off if it really is an event. Have more plans than you think you will ever need. if you ever say to yourself, I have enough plans, I've planned enough, then that should be a cue that you have not planned enough. Keep planning. It never hurts. If you've got 20 plans in place, just saying 20 escape routes, plan more if you've got the time, because it's only, you're only going to get one shot at this kind of thing. If a nuclear bomb, I've done the time on this now, and I've sort of reversed it a little bit. If a nuclear bomb did go off in Detroit, and I was at an awkward time in the year where the wind patterns blew back this way, then I would have 15 to 20 minutes to be at least 100 miles south of where I am. 15 to 20 minutes, or at least be on that way in a vehicle with some type of protective gear and just hauling butt down that way. You're not going to have much time in this type of event. Not going to have much time at all. And that's why planning is everything. Planning is everything. I mean, I can have all the gear in the world, but if I don't plan on how I'm going to use it, or plan on how I'm going to store it and take it with me, then it's not much of a plan at all. It's just gear. And, that's the most important part is planning. Are there any specific questions about nuclear war? Bible is the most important, Keisha. All right. Well, the last live cast said I was going to do a giveaway with the same things because I got a bunch of these, and I figure somebody might can use them. Might can use them. But I also got the second thing I'm going to give away. Y'all know how YouTube is real funny about guns and ammo and things like that. I have this empty box right here. If you can see that, it's an empty box I'm going to give away, but it's going to be the second prize. First one, we're going to give away the Frog Top. Two of these, 2 chem lights, glow sticks, what everybody calls them. I call them chem lights from the military. We call them chem lights. And then this camouflage baklava, or basically mask that covers your whole head. So we're going to give away those first. And then we're going to give away this empty box that used to have 45 ACP in it, I believe, but empty. It's heavy though. It's heavy. It's real heavy. So let's do that. All right. We're going to start off. Y'all know how we do the giveaways here. It's going to be a number between 1 and 100. And when I type in go, everybody go. And then I'll put up my email address, for whoever wins it. Well, let me get my chat active. And whoever wins it, I'll put up my email address. You can email me and I'll send out your gift. All right, hold on. Is there a difference between an attack from Russia or China, as in the grade of nuclear power and guidance? I would say yes. And the reason I would say yes on that is because there's almost 17,000 nuclear weapons in the world today. And about 55% of those, maybe 60% of those belong to Russia. So if we look at that alone, then that tells us that a huge part of the Russian arsenal was built long ago, and they have not been upgraded. We're talking a lot of bombs that are impact bombs and things like that. So what China is developing now I know Russia has the new missiles that they're really, really bragging about, these hypersonic missiles they claim can't be shot down. And, maybe they can't, maybe they can, I don't know. But that technology, that's pretty good from what I understand. But what we have to look at now is China didn't have nuclear weapons, or at least to our knowledge, didn't have nuclear weapons, 20, 30 years ago. Everything they've got is on the cutting edge of technology. They're not using old, they're not using low-grade uranium, low-grade plutonium. They're using high-grade, highly enriched uranium. They're using fission boosted fusion bombs. They're using the highest technology that's available today. So China, now, of course, Russia has the numbers when it comes to nukes. I mean, they have enough. They've got a lot. It's like 7,000 and something. I'll have to look it up, but it's around that range, 7,000 and something. China, last count, had like 300. but they probably have more now. And these have been developed in the last decade or so. So these are the most modern technology. So I give Russia the advantage in sheer numbers, but I actually have to give China the advantage in technology right now with the nukes, and especially with their guidance systems. The safest place to be, Prepper Trucking, safest place. And I got your email, brother. And that's a great idea you have. And I'm working on that right now for a video. That's a great idea. I'm glad you said that. He was talking about a video on assessment, on how to evaluate where we are, where we stand, and what we need to do. And that's a really good point. You know, there's a lot of people out there trying to sell gear. They're like, here's the top 10 list. And by the way, I happen to sell all this stuff. You know, no, I don't want to do that. I want to talk about things that how we can look at what we got. I mean, I can't afford to go out and buy the best of everything. And I think most people can't. So we have to look at what we got, make the best of it, and assess our situation and determine the threats, you know, that we face at that point in time. And thanks. And I'm going to be doing that. Yeah. You know, the safest place to be is furthest away from a large city. And I know you're in South Carolina. I'll tell you one good thing about that particular area is the mountain range up through there is the larger cities are situated at the bottom of it, like Atlanta and Charlotte up near the top of it in North Carolina area. So you're starting looking at the South Carolina area, the Blue Ridge Mountains that go through there. And especially with the wind breaks that are provided with that mountain, if you look at the wind patterns that normally come through the area and the valleys of those mountains are going to be some really good places to be. That's where I'm planning on heading, brother. All right. Joe Biden said you're safe, so you're safe. Hey, yeah, Big Joe said it. You know it's true, right? All right. All right. Let me get on to the number here. I wrote one down. And it's a number between 1 and 100. And whoever gets it after I type in go gets the first prize. And let's go. No. Ooh, getting closer. Oh, somebody was close. No, you're not too late. Keep on going. Bug out, Bubba. Between 1 and 100. Transylvania County, save yourself. I know exactly where that's at, man. I got some family. My cousins live up there, or lived up there. I should say, don't live there no more. Oh, everybody's throwing some big numbers out. Give y'all a hint. It's a little smaller. Oh, that's the closest one so far. Can't say who or else give it away. All right. All right. Everybody's still way too high. Way too high. I'll give a hint there. Hop, Law and Order Prepper, right there. Number 3. Number 3. Number 3, Law and Order Prepper. So email me at, I'll put it up. It's probably easy to remember, but I'll put it up. Survivor. Can't hardly see it. My microphone's like right in front of my keyboard right here, so it's like hard to see anything. All right, so Law and Order Prepper got that one with the number 3. Number 3, Law and Order Prepper. You got that one. So email me at survivor@serioussurvivor.com, and we'll work out the details to get that prize to you. Now we have another prize. We'll probably get kicked off of YouTube. A box right here. Here's what it says on the box, if y'all can see it. It's empty, because you know I wouldn't send a full box like that on YouTube. All right. There must be a pretty big delay. Everybody's still guessing numbers. Can y'all hear me? All right. I don't think anybody can hear me. All right. Yeah, Law and Order. Wow, I really mistyped that. That's supposed to say Law and Order Prepper, not whatever that says right there. 1 with the number 3. All right. Yeah, I saw that, Dan. You said it. He said a little earlier than you, about probably like 10, 15 lines above you, man. But we got another one. We got another one going on right here. And this is for, like I said, this is for this red box. This red box. I think you'll like it. It's heavy. I think you'll like it. All right. I think there's just like a big delay in between the comments and like what I'm actually saying live. It looks like there's probably a 30-second delay, something like that. I got to get used to that. I still ain't used to that. Okay. So the final giveaway tonight will be that red box that we see right there. And we will do the same thing. I'm going to write down a number and then I'll type in go. And the first person to get it gets the box. All right, let's go. People are all around it. Haven't hit it yet, though. Nope, nope, nope. Close, getting close. I remember the first time I did a giveaway, I was like between 1 and 200, and it took like a long time. All right, everybody's been around it. Oh, there we go. Dan, you got it this time, my man. Dan Lee, number 42. Dan Lee, 42. So email me at survivor@SiriusSurvivor.com. Yep, email me, shoot me an email there, today, tomorrow, sometime soon, and I'll get those out to you, Dan Lee, my friend. And that's yours there. The red box. Just in case anybody's wondering, I can get a bunch of these red boxes up here. I mean, I know it's been running tight some places, but I've actually run across a pretty decent place up here. All right. Well, as soon as the lag catches up to me here, because I see the lag in the comments. I don't know if y'all see it or not. So All right. Sort of makes me wonder if it goes through sometimes. Still says live. Yeah, Danley, you won, buddy. Email me at survivor@Serious.Survivor.com. And I hope you put that empty box to good use, my friend. All right. Well, we talked a lot about nuclear radiation tonight. And this is one of those things that can carry over to so many different things. If we had like an attack on the power grid, or if we had a hacking attack, a cyber attack that took, just say it changed the parameters for some of the servo drives inside of the nuclear reactors, some of the Siemens in there, then it can have a catastrophic effect, causing a possible meltdown. And we could be exposed to this type of stuff. Being able to recognize it and understanding what we see. This would be for this type of event, this is one of your most valuable tools, because this is like my eyes. It's my eyes for radiation, because I can look and I can see somebody standing over there with a gun, or I can see 5 guys standing over here that look like, I might have to fight them or something. I don't know what to say, but I can't look over there and see gamma radiation. I can't look over there and see happy radio. I mean, I was reading your thing right there. Sorry, that's where I got happy. But I can't look over there and see alpha radiation. And, that's why one of these are your eyes and ears, in that type of situation. And it only takes once to save your life. So it's worth that investment. Worst comes to worst. From what I've seen, stuff like this doesn't really lose value. So, 20 years from now, maybe I'll just sell it if nothing happens. But it's a definite thing that's going to help you out in this type of situation. Nuclear times of isolation for different types of radiation. That's a really, really good question. All right, now I look at it as two different fields, or two different categories, and that's basically, if there's a nuclear explosion, then I know that fallout is going to dissipate at the very latest. It's going to take 30 days. All right, so I know that's a long time, but if I can hold out in my bunker for 30 days, then I should be able to safely exit that bunker after that 30 days. But then once again, that's what comes in, because depending on the amount of radiation thrown into the atmosphere from that nuclear explosion, then, I can use this device to detect it. Because if there wasn't much, if it was an airburst and there's not much radioactive material out there, if there's not any fallout locally because it was an airburst, then this device, a radiation detector, will tell me that. Otherwise, I'm just sitting there in my basement for another 30 days, waiting on time to expire. Now, when it comes to a meltdown type of event, if you're within close proximity, that radiation doesn't go away for about 20,000 years. Depends on the half-life of the elements. But for what we're most likely to face, because most people don't live, at least, I don't know. I don't live within 5 or 10 miles of my nuclear, power plant. So that's not going to affect me. But a nuclear explosion, 30 days would be the most you would have to wait, because a nuclear explosion does not continue to give off radiation. Once those radioactive particles have fallen, have settled, have dissipated, then you'll be able to leave that area. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to come out of my bunker and I'm going to go out in my front yard and, just hang out. No, I'm going to get out of Dodge at that point. I'm going to leave town, because there will still be some radioactivity in that area, and possibly enough to, do a lot of harm if I stay there for a long time. So 5 to 30 days is the time frame, but having a radiation detector will help. And this is where I have to go back old school right here. And that's with this right here. And because with this comes with a cable, right? That has a detector on the end of that cable. And the cable is 18 foot long, the one I got. So I plug my cable into this device and run that detector, and I put it out above my basement or whatever, and I'll leave it there. This is supposing I can't leave my area. And I'll leave it there and close my door. And at that point, I'm going to have a real-time reading of the radiation that's outside without me having to actually go out there and be exposed to it. So you're looking at 5 to 30 days, depending on the severity of the fallout. And that all depends on the magnitude of the burst and the elevation of the burst. If it was a surface burst, then it's going to take the full 30 days before that fallout has dissipated and you can get out of that area. But I still recommend getting out as quick as you can. If it's an air burst, you're probably going to be okay from beginning to end as far as radiation goes. Can contaminated water be filtered? Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Because water itself is one of those fascinating molecules that is just, I mean, it's its own thing. You know, water is water, and it can exist in many different forms. But water cannot be radioactive. And what I mean is that water, the element water, will never be radioactive, but you may have radioactive particles fall into that water. And if that's the case, then you can use a water filter to filter those particles out the same way you would filter particulates out, or bacteria, biological contaminants. As long as it keeps the particles out of the water, then it'll be safe to drink. Having a detector will verify that for you. But water itself cannot be radiated, only the particles that fall into it. Now, there's a lot of places online that will sell you a radiation water detector, a radiation water filter. And I bought one, right, just to see what it would do. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it looked exactly the same as my regular water filters do, the life straws and things like that. But basically, if you can filter that water adequately, then you don't have to worry about radiation, because it cannot be radiated. Unlike food, other particles, because a lot of food is naturally radioactive, a lot of food is naturally radioactive. Matter of fact, one of the most radioactive substances on Earth is Brazil nuts. It's not a damaging type of radiation, but it gives off a lot of radiation because it contains, I think, strontium and radium on an elemental level, but it gives off a little bit. But yes, you can filter water to remove the radioactive contaminants from it. What was the brand I bought? That's a good question, Scrap Man. I'm gonna have to go dig it out of one of my bags back there, but I will make a point of passing that on to you, maybe on my next live stream or in a video. But I will tell you what brand that was that I bought. It was I bought it off of Amazon, I believe. Back when I used to buy stuff off Amazon, I stopped doing that, but back when I used to buy stuff off there, I bought it off of there, and very similar. Yeah, I'm sure the Berkeley can do it. I'm sure it can, because the Berkeleys are well known for their filtering abilities. And that's all that a radioactive water filter does. Is sort of a misleading term, because when I took this water filter, right, and really looked at it, it had the same construction as like a life straw, except it had a bunch of sand in it. Okay, it had a bunch of sand in it. And I still really haven't determined why it had the sand in it. I think mainly for looks. But water isn't radioactive and cannot be made radioactive. If I break apart, if I start to fission the water particles, I don't have water anymore. It's unlike different substances like that. Water is really special. But water can 600 or 300 plus. That's a good question. I got the 600 right here. I like it a lot. I haven't used the 300 plus, Eric. And yeah, so the Berkeleys could definitely handle that. They can. The worst thing you got to worry about when you have water that's been irradiated. And we say irradiated or contaminated, it doesn't mean the water is radioactive. It just means it has those particles in it. So the worst thing you got to worry about is, am I so close to this water while I'm filtering it that I'm still taking radiation? That's what you do have to worry about. Because even though I know this glass of water can't be radioactive, it could have radioactive particles in it. And when me holding it, that is then affecting my hand. So the main thing that you want to take into consideration there is filtering your water away from your body. If you know there are particles in that water that are radioactive, keeping that a distance from your body. Beta 10, 20 foot, gamma is going to go a long ways if it's unimpeded, but it'll go through the human body. But lead and concrete will stop it. 13 inches of concrete will stop some of the most energetic gamma. If you're building a bunker, 13-inch concrete, line it with some lead, you're good to go. All right. Well, there's definitely a lot more we could talk about when it comes to radiation, but I tried to touch on some things that I think would be helpful, knowledge that would be helpful, gear that maybe be helpful to obtain. Radiation detector, I really recommend it. Other than that, Radiation is the silent killer. It's the invisible enemy. We can't see it. This is the only way we see it. This is the only way we see it. So without one of those, if I'm in that environment, I might as well say I'm done, because there's nothing I can do to prevent from being exposed at that point. Good point. Save yourself. Yes, that is one of the chemicals that and also cesium too, in the chemtrails that supposedly don't exist. Yeah, they were. Aluminum, yeah, also was. And do you know that barium is just a couple of protons away from uranium, the same grade uranium they use in nuclear reactors? And this is type of stuff they were putting in those chemtrails, probably still are. It's absolutely crazy. The odds of nuclear war, I think it's 50-50. And the reason I say that is because this country is taking a turn. And I'm not even going to get political on that, but we can see that it's taking a turn. And a lot of countries in the world are going to perceive this as weakness. And a lot of countries in the world are going to take advantage of this. And I think the possibility of a nuclear war, I think as crazy as this might sound, I think a nuclear war is more possible than an all-out conventional world war, like World War II. We're not going to see that again. We might see troops in Afghanistan, troops in Iraq, troops in Syria, like we've seen, like I've been there. We might see that. But an all-out world war, I don't think we'll see. I think we'll see a nuclear war before we see that. And the reason is Iran, North Korea, two of the ones that threaten the United States on a daily basis, cannot beat the United States with their military right now. But they can hit. Do you think North Korea would nuke us? No. They're going to nuke South Korea because that's our allies. Although what this administration would do about that, I don't know. Hopefully something. But they have the potential to start a nuclear war. I've always believed it only takes one or two. One country sends a nuclear weapon and we may not see a nuclear war. But as soon as another country retaliates with a second nuclear weapon, that's when we're going to see nuclear war. And we're going to see it in all of our major cities. All of our major cities, those are the targets. I mean, that's the targets. It's pretty obvious. They don't want to waste a nuke, in an area that's, 500 square miles and only 1,000 people. They're going to send a nuke where there's 11 million people in, 50 square miles. So I think it's a possibility. I think that and the EMP, very strong possibility. I mean, economic collapse and some of these other things we're talking about, those are going to happen. We're going to have a recession this year, whether we want it or not. Some people will be affected. Some will not. Depends on what your job is. Depends on what company you work for. So, I mean, those kind of things, are going to happen. But they come and go. I mean, if we think about it, economic collapse, I mean, I see a lot of videos on the internet, economic collapse. I've even done a few. They come and go. How many economic collapses, how many recessions have you seen in your life? How many recessions have you seen? I've seen a few. I'm 50. I turned 50 in 2020. I'll be 51 this year. Dang, that's hard to believe. But, we pull through recessions. We pull through economic collapses. Pulling through a nuclear war is a different story. What are my thoughts on the EMP? I think an EMP is also a very likely scenario. The scariest thing to me, when I sit back and I sort of look at this about an EMP, is I don't think a country, I don't think Iran and I don't think North Korea would launch an EMP, because first of all, EMP is going to be devastating, but it's not going to be as devastating as a lot of movies like to make out, a lot of movies and books like to make out it'll be, because a lot of things will survive. If you have electronic devices that are not plugged into the wall, believe it or not, most of these things are going to survive. I mean, just physics tells us that. And it depends on which sources you read. If you read sensationalist news sources that, doom and gloom and all that, they say everything's destroyed. You read really optimistic news sources, they say a lot of things will live. I'm sort of in the middle. I think that a lot of things will survive because they're designed, they're designed to function that way these days. But I think an EMP is a very good possibility. I think that if we do see an EMP, that it's going to be from a country like China. China doesn't want to destroy us. China would just very much like to have our resources. So an EMP would be the first step in a military invasion. And I don't think there's any other country in the world other than China and Russia that are capable of sending an EMP to us and following it up with an invasion. Well, all right, y'all. We've been going about 2 hours now, and hopefully we talked about some stuff that maybe helped somebody out. Maybe, I don't know, open somebody's eyes to some gear they might need. Maybe, just helped in general. I want to say congratulations to the 2 winners tonight. Make sure to send me your email or send me your information in my email or contact me, and we'll figure it out and get your prizes out to you this week. And I want to say thanks a lot for everybody that come and listen to me tonight. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your night. I hope you have a great week. Oh, two other videos. I am going to have a video coming out on the different types of SHTF. The same one I talked about last week, but I wasn't able to finish up this week. I just had a lot of things come up. The different types of SHTF and some of the things we can do to help us prepare for the different aspects or different categories of it. And also the assessment video that Prepper Trucking talked to me about. And that's a really good idea. And that's he was right in his email. He said a lot of people don't talk about that. Now, people don't talk about assessing themselves, for this type of situation. Everybody wants to point the finger and say, you don't have this gear. You don't have this skill. Now, we need to look at ourselves. I need to look at myself and say, well, what can I do and what can I not do? I'm 51 years old, so I can't do what I did when I was 30. So, I got to face that fact, and I got to assess my situation and determine what's the best route for me to take from here. And that's what I want to make a video about there, is talking about the best routes we can take, what we can assess, what we can make better, and, what we can evaluate, things like that. Well, all right, everybody. Thanks a lot for coming out tonight. God bless. And I guess for now, Serious Survivor out. Thank you, Scrapman. Wow. Do you have any questions, man? That's amazing. That is amazing. All right. Well, I'm going to do another, before I go, I know I just said I was going to go, but before I go, going to do another live stream towards the end of this week. Trying to find a good day to where, everybody's, what's a good time? Let me know what's a good time for y'all. Cause I start this at 6:30, 7:30 Eastern time, but I sort of feel like a lot of people might miss out because they are, they're in a different time zone. Maybe I can start later, like 8 o'clock or something like that, and make sure, because I definitely like for everybody to, be involved, everybody be able to hear everything we got to say here. All right. Thank you, Scrapman. I do appreciate that, brother. All right, everybody. Well, I'm going to sign off for now, but God bless you all. And I hope you all have a good night and a good next couple of days, and keep an eye out for the next couple of videos. Oh, yeah, one more thing. And My Patriot Food Supply, y'all know that I've been doing the commercials for them. I got a new code for everybody. I'll be putting that code out tomorrow on the website in the comments section, not website, but YouTube channel in the comments section. It saves you money on something. I don't really know what yet. I just know I got a new code, and I'm going to put it out for everybody to have. And thanks a lot, y'all. And for now, Serious Survivor out.